Ask not what we all be can do for you. Ask what you can do for we all be.
Mr. Mays?
Yeah.
How are you doing? Mr. Mays is on the head. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying I'm here.
Yes, sir. It's an honor to hear you on, Mr. Max Mays. Now, you were actually the official investigator for the defense for Curtis Flowers, is that correct?
That was in his 2010 trial.
Okay, the 2010 trial, that was the sixth trial, correct?
Correct.
The way he was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to death row once again. So could you explain, what are your thoughts on the case about Curtis Flowers?
My thoughts are, and I'm not sure how much I can say to you because the trial is coming up again, and whether I will be involved in it, I'm saying it's coming up again. His case is on appeal right now, and should it get overturned, it will probably go back to trial again. So I have to be cautious as to what I say about it. You know, I guess my thoughts, and based on my participation and the evidence that I gathered during my time in the case, is that I don't see anything that points towards Curtis Flowers being guilty of anything. I mean, I would say from an investigative standpoint that the evidence to me is overwhelming of his innocence. Rather than guilt. Someone would have to show me otherwise, okay?
Yes, sir. It's kind of strange that there's no evidence tying him to the scene of the crime. Everything seems to be circumstantial evidence. No evidence directly tying him to the scene of the crime. But yeah, he sits on death row. What was the problem with the case then, if he's innocent?
I don't know. I don't know. You asked yourself that question after 6 trials. What's the problem with the case? I don't know if it's the environment, the location, where the case is being tried as to him constantly being found guilty. I guess you would have to say that there's something wrong with the case that the Mississippi Supreme Court over time has overturned it at least 3 times. That there's something wrong with the case. The evidence in itself, I just don't see it being there. It's just, I wish I could go more into detail with you about my involvement and what the evidence says and stuff, but I'm skeptical of doing that with the case looming in the Supreme Court now, and should it be overturned, what my involvement might be at that point. But as I said, from an investigative standpoint, I just do not see where there's any evidence indicating anything about Curtis Flowers being remotely involved in the case. I will say this much: it is one of the worst investigative cases from a law enforcement standpoint that I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I've done this for years. I still do it. I retired in 2005 as a criminal investigator for the Hinds County District Attorney's Office. I now do a lot of work for criminal defense attorneys now, especially in the areas of capital murders and murder cases. And the Curtis Flowers case stands out as the only way I can say it is one of the worst, if not the worst, investigative case I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, it was the investigation itself was poorly done, and I call it a law enforcement investigation. I hesitate when I say that it was a law enforcement investigation. It was even during the trial, it was hard to determine who led the investigation. You had 2 bodies that were actually involved in the investigation. You had the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, and you had the District Attorney's Office of Montgomery County. Their investigator, that from all indications, he may have been the lead investigator, but at trial he said he was not. and the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation say they were not the lead investigators in it. I've never, ever been involved in a case where no one takes responsibility for being the lead investigative body. I've never been involved in a case where there's scant, and when I say scant, it's almost to a point that scant is not the correct word. Investigative reports in the case. There are none. There are literally no investigative reports. And when I say that in every investigation, be it a burglary or a homicide or whatever it is, you always have investigative reports. In the Curtis Flowers case, one of the things that amazed me from the very beginning, that there were no investigative reports. I mean, most of the case hinged on notes on legal pads. I'd never seen anything like that. It's amazing to me that would have occurred, and to this day, it's still amazing to me that happened. That most of the case was written on legal pads. I mean, most of the investigation was actually done on legal pads. I spent nights. I mean, and when I say nights, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm up looking through tons and tons of material that was sent to me by the Office of Capitol Defense. And at some point, I just stopped and asked, where is the investigative reports? Where are they? Where? And there were none. I mean, we're talking about trial 6. And when I asked for the investigative reports, I'm told, well, we have everything that they gave us. And when you go back, and they did go back and ask for the law enforcement reports, there were literally none. I think I may have found one actual typewritten report from the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations. I will say this much for the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. Their crime scene unit, the crime scene unit done a wonderful job. I will never, ever say anything bad about the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation's crime scene unit. Mm-hmm. But the actual investigators who went out and gathered supposedly evidence and stuff from those with the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation and the investigator for the district attorney's office, what they gathered, I don't even consider to be evidence. I mean, it's just an amazing thing. You're talking about someone, and this was. Let me say this about the Curtis Flowers case. First thing that stands out to anyone that's ever been involved in it. You have 4 people who were murdered, okay? Mm-hmm. They're in a 20,000 square foot furniture store. Each person is shot execution style. You have 3 of the bodies in close proximity to each other. You have one body that is about 15 feet away. That's the body of Miss Tardy herself, one of the owners of the store. These people are all shot execution style. You have a 16-year-old white male athlete. You have a 42-year-old African-American male. You have a 52-year-old white female and a 58-year-old white female. There is no indication whatsoever that a struggle ever took place inside of that store that day. The first thing that comes to mind when you're looking at that investigation is why and how can this take place in a facility of this size that is filled with furniture? When you talk about furniture, you're talking about tables, you're talking about chairs, you're talking about lamps, whatever is in there, and no one, not a single person, attempts to get away. Not a single disturbing of the contents of the store is noticed. Nothing. And you have to ask yourself, if Curtis Flowers committed these atrocious acts alone, why didn't anyone try to get away? I mean, human nature, and think about it from your standpoint, human nature is to survive.
Right.
You've got one individual who summarily kills one person after the other, and no one attempts to get away. No one attempts to fight back. From an investigative standpoint, that tells me there's more than one person. Someone will ask the question, well, couldn't that other person have been Curtis Flowers? Answer to that, yes. But was that ever investigated? Were those lines ever followed? Were those leads ever followed from an investigative standpoint? You don't see in any documentation by anyone involved from law enforcement or from the district attorney's office or the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, you see no one involved who says, we looked at this and we believe that maybe there was more than one perpetrator and that Curtis Flowers was one. Let us see who the others may have been, the other or others may have been. It's not there. It's not. I have never in my lifetime been involved in a homicide case, and in this case, a quadruple homicide, where the incompetence of the people conducting the investigation is so astounding. I mean, you just have, it is I don't know how you put it, multi-level of incompetence in the investigation. I mean, I wouldn't, of the people involved in the Curtis Flowers investigation, I couldn't see them investigating a dog fight. Now, I'm being honest about it. It is a sad and tragic story. It's a sad and tragic thing for the Tardy family. It's a sad and tragic thing for Curtis Flowers. It's a sad and tragic thing for Montgomery County. The county has its own history. That's the same place where Fannie Lou Hamer was severely beaten during the Civil Rights Movement. It has that history. It has the history of the White Citizens Council. It's just racism abundant in the county and stuff. And you would think in 1996 when this happened, you would not want to add fuel to that fire. You would want to know the truth about what happened in the Tardy murders. And that you would do whatever it took to make sure that the truth was told and that the family learned the truth. And I don't think it was done in this instance. I have said this over and over and over, and I will say it probably until either A, I'm proven wrong, or to the day I die. I will put my entire investigative career up to say that Curtis Flowers was not involved and that Curtis Flowers killed no one in the Tardy furniture store murders. The evidence is not there. It is not there, and we deal in evidence, or we should. Let me change that because I run into it every day. I tell people all the time, from a law enforcement perspective, we've gone 360 degrees. When a case is presented to law enforcement, the first thing you do, you start looking at the evidence. And we shouldn't have, as the old Southern saying, go a dog in that hunt, okay? Mm-hmm. We should let the evidence speak for itself. But law enforcement, and I've noticed this especially over the last 20 years, someone becomes a target of law enforcement, and it's guilty until you proven innocent, not innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
The function of law enforcement is to gather evidence, and to gather evidence to prove either A, the guilt of someone, or B, the innocence of someone. Rarely will you be involved in a law enforcement investigation where you will see a law enforcement agent or a law enforcement body say, our investigations have led us to conclude that this person who we've named as the culprit is not guilty. We don't do that because our mindset says that once we have targeted someone, that we have to put together evidence of that person's guilt. And that's not what law enforcement is about. That's not what investigations are about. It's not about proving somebody guilty. It's about gathering evidence to prove either A, the guilt of someone, or B, the innocence of someone. We shouldn't have a dog in that hunt. We shouldn't be judge and jury of that. We're just evidence gatherers, but we've gone beyond being evidence gatherers to basically being judge and jury. And it's not just the Curtis Flowers case. There are a lot of cases like that. There are a lot of people in our system now that are victims of that. There are a lot of people in prisons now that are victims of that. And I'm not an advocate for people who commit crimes. I'm an advocate for evidence.
Right.
I'm an advocate for truth. And in the Curtis Flowers case, I didn't find that. Nowhere. I got probably 3 boxes of transcripts and notes and everything on the Curtis Flowers case right here now. And periodically I stop and look at it. Did I miss something? Is there something that I missed that would change my mind? And since my involvement in 2010, I can tell you I haven't found anything.
Let me ask you this, like, how unusual is it for the prosecution or for law enforcement in general to focus in on one suspect, especially if there's no evidence tying that suspect to the crime off the bat?
I don't know how unusual it is. I found it in this case to be extremely unusual. I found in this case that what happened, and this is just from my standpoint, Curtis Flowers became an easy target. He worked at Tardy Furniture for about a week. He left Tardy Furniture. He did not return to Tardy Furniture. They built a case of a cloud of a disgruntled employee around him that I don't think ever existed. He was just an easy target. You could put together an easy case against Curtis Flowers. All you needed to do was be able to place him either at the scene or in the vicinity at the time that the crimes occurred, and you have your man.
You know, also I want to ask you, too, I mean, it's like he didn't own a gun at the time, but the gun that they, they said was used in the killing belonged to a Doyle Simpson, owned the gun allegedly, and he's never been questioned correct in connection to the crime, or never been considered a true suspect.
Now, Doyle was questioned. Doyle was never considered a suspect, which is odd also. It's so much in the case because a car fit in the description driven by Doyle Simpson was seen across the street from Tardy Furniture that morning, a 2-toned car with 2 African-American males standing out in front of the car armed with.
Oh, that's interesting.
Also, he never became a suspect. And in relation to that gun, and you would have to look at the transcript of Trial 6, the ballistics did not conclusively say that gun fired the projectiles that killed the 4 people in Tardy Furniture. as a matter of fact, in trial 6, there is, from the state ballistics examiner, an admission that that type of projectile is one of the greatest types that are misidentified at times as having come from one particular weapon or another. I mean, there's so much about ballistics that is up in the air now that you can't depend on ballistics itself to tie a weapon to a crime anymore. It helps in some cases, but if you do some research on it, you will find out that that's one of those issues, almost like pre-DNA.
Mr. Mays?
Yes.
You were saying that the ballistics are unreliable right now?
There's a lot of discussion about the reliability of ballistics now. If you were to research it, you will find numerous subjects on the reliability and unreliability of ballistics. In the Curtis Flowers case, that came to be in his case where there's just no definitive answer as to whether or not those particular projectiles came from the gun that supposedly was owned by Doyle Simpson. Now, remember, the gun was never found.
Yes.
Doyle Simpson's gun was never found. They compared those projectiles taken from the bodies of those individuals to projectiles taken from a fence post at Doyle Simpson's house. The actual gun was never found. It is a most interesting case. I could go on and on and on about it. Let me ask you something. Have you talked with the attorneys that represent him?
Yes, sir. I actually talked to I was at the oral argument last week, and I had a chance to talk to. Yes, sir. I recorded it. You give me your emails. I can send you everything I got on the case. I spoke to his mom before and stuff and everything. I got it online.
Yeah, I was at the oral arguments. That's
oh, really? I was at the top. So I wish I could have met you then, but I talked to Alton Steiner. But I talked to Sherry Lynn Johnson on the record, and she was really perplexed about the whole thing. I think she did a good job under the circumstances of presenting the case. And I was surprised at the questions by the justice. And I was wondering were they sincere. I don't know how to read them, but it's like they were actually pretty good questions, especially the black justice. I was surprised he talked about the racism or bias possibility in the jury selection.
Justice King asked a lot of questions I thought were real good questions. But, if I understand it correctly, and that's in all the years that I've been doing this, that's the first time I've gone to an oral argument at the Mississippi Supreme Court.
Yes, sir.
There were 4 points that they were discussing that day, but I don't think that it's limited to those 4 points. Those are just 4 points that they wanted to discuss about the case. I'm quite sure that there are other things that they may be considering, and I'm just curious as to what the outcome is going to be, and more curious as to if the outcome is overturning the Curtis Flowers case again, what happens to Curtis Flowers?
Yes.
That's unprecedented. Curtis' case is unprecedented in this country. What happens to him? Do you try? And I've asked this question of some people that I consider to be legal scholars.
Right.
What happens if the Mississippi Supreme Court overturns the Curtis Flowers case this time? Is he tried again?
That's crazy. On the same evidence? It's like Groundhog Day. On the same evidence?
That's what I'm saying. Is he tried again? No.
And what can you get a fair trial? You think you can get a fair trial anywhere in Mississippi?
This is my take, and I don't think it will ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you went to a jurisdiction within Mississippi that was more racially diverse, I think he may anywhere outside of Montgomery County. It's been tried before down on this to the Gulf Coast.
Right.
And I think if you got a jurisdiction where there's the racial mix up was a lot different, I think he would. But ask yourself, a young man who's been in jail almost 20 years.
Good. Mm-hmm.
If he has another trial, what's the purpose of it?
No, do you ever was tested by a polygraph test? Did you ever administer a polygraph test for Mr. Flowers?
I think he had one, but I don't think he's ever had a polygraph exam. But now I'm one of those people. I don't put much stock in polygraph examinations either. I'm just
right.
And if you need to call me back, just feel free.
Yes, I will. Thank you so much.
All righty.
All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too.